All right, well, welcome everyone. I declare that we do have quorum. The mayor is joining us virtually, and she's on our screen now, and everyone else is here. I'll ask Councillor Morrison to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Chair Stone, and through you, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robinson-Huron Treaty number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions toward real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations.
Thanks very much. I have a motion. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Renwick. Be it resolved that Planning Council meeting agenda dated November 13, 2024 be adopted as printed and circulated. Any comments? All in favor? And that carries. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I'm seeing none. All right. I'd like to welcome everyone to the public portion of the meeting to consider applications to amend the Community Planning Permit Bylaw 2022-97 pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act. The procedure of the public meeting will be as follows. A brief explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and any correspondence received to date will be given by staff. The applicant or the representative will be asked to provide any additional comments without repeating the information already outlined by staff. Any members of the public present in person or electronically will then be permitted to ask questions or provide comments respecting the applications. Council will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, the planner, or anyone giving presentation. Once the public meeting is concluded, the input received and the proposed amendments will be considered by council. Any persons making representation are requested to first state their name and mailing address, and please note that presentations are limited to 10 minutes. Please be informed that an appellant must provide an oral submission at a public meeting or written submission prior to the passage of the CPB bylaw amendment. Otherwise, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss the appeal. If you wish to be notified of the passage of a bylaw, you must file either with the recording secretary or with the clerk a written request for notification prior to the passage of the proposed bylaw. Each notice of complete application and public meeting included an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed amendment, and notice was required to be posted at the subject lands. Notice was therefore considered to have been provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and applicable sections of the Huntsville Official Plan. And our first one is the Monkman application, and Madeline's going to speak to that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, the subject property is located at 3177 South Portage Road. The lot is designated waterfront in Huntsville's official plan and is under the waterfront residential 120-meter precinct with the Natural Constraints 2 overlay in the Community Planning Permit Bylaw. A Community Planning Permit Bylaw amendment application was submitted to change the precinct on the lands from a waterfront residential 120-meter precinct to a waterfront residential 60-meter precinct, a waterfront residential 120-meter precinct with exception X, and waterfront residential 60-meter precinct with exception Y. The exceptions will include the following as listed on the screen and include a reduced setback to the Coldwater Lake for the severed lot and a lot size permission for the southern lot. Both exceptions will limit development to the identified building envelopes as shown on the drawing and implement the actions and recommendations of the slope and setback assessment prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions to the satisfaction of the town of Huntsville through a community planning permit. A concurrent consent application was submitted for the creation of 2 new waterfront lots, residential lots. The severed lot would have an area of 1.2 hectares with 219 meters of frontage. Retained Lot A would have an area of 1.3 hectares with 119 meters of frontage. and retained Lot B would have an area of 0.8 hectares with 92 meters of frontage. The conditions of consent have been included on the screen. These include the standard conditions along with an additional consent finalization fee being paid for the retained Lot B, the community planning permit bylaw amendment being approved, and conditions requested by the District of Muskoka. New waterfront lots are required to have a minimum lot area of 1 hectare. Frontage varies between 60 meters and 120 meter requirements, depending on if the property is classified under the waterfront residential 60 meter or waterfront residential 120 meter precincts. The amendment to change the precinct from waterfront residential 120 to waterfront residential 60 on both retained lots would permit a lesser required lot frontage. The severed lot and retained lot A would meet the minimum frontage and area requirements of the waterfront residential 120 meter and waterfront residential 60 meter precincts respectively. However, retained lot B would be deficient in lot area, and site-specific exception Y has been proposed to address this. Permitted uses in both the WR1 and WR2 precincts are limited to single detached dwellings and associated accessory structures. Development on the lot is currently located within the limits of the proposed retained Lot A, and the applicants have demonstrated where appropriate building and servicing envelopes are located on the severed lot and retained Lot B. Where waterfront properties abut cold water bodies, a 30-meter setback for development is required. In this instance, the sloping and setback assessment was completed by Riverstone, which identifies that a 20-meter setback would be appropriate, and therefore the site-specific exception has been proposed only on the severed lands. When reviewing policies respecting shoreline structures and shoreline buffers, it should be noted that all 3 of the properties would be permitted a 15-meter shoreline activity area based on their proposed frontages. When evaluating the potential creation of new waterfront residential lots, the size and lot fabric shall be configured in such a way that consideration will be given to environmental and development constraints, amongst other matters. Additionally, official plan policies state that the minimum requirements, unless otherwise specified, should be no smaller than 1 hectare with 60 meters of frontage. In this instance, the proposed severed lot meets the waterfront residential lot requirements, however, creates 1 retained parcel to the south that is deficient in size, being retained Lot B. The smaller lot size was a recommendation of the Riverstone report, which analyzes that although the 2 new southern undeveloped lots, when combined, have a greater than 2 hectares in area, which would provide the necessary area if evenly split, the proposed 0.8 hectare size for retained Lot B is most appropriate given the sloping constraints on the proposed severed lot. Riverstone recommends that the additional area be taken from the southern lot to provide suitable level area to develop on the severed portion of the property. From a natural heritage perspective, the report states that this trade-off between a reduction in lot area and frontage requirements to provide a more suitable building envelope is warranted and to reduce the amount of site augmentation that would be needed on the central lot, and would therefore result in reduced potential for negative impacts. Natural constraints on the site have been identified as sloping of 20 to 40% grade, Lake of Bays being a cold water lake, and the shoreline being type 2 fish habitat. The assessment completed by Riverstone provides an understanding of these environmental conditions, site characteristics, and the significant natural heritage features and functions on the property. The building envelopes have been refined on the proposed severed lot to include a setback from the top of the bank of the steep slope, and it's been demonstrated that the building envelope on the severed lot could be appropriately sited given these constraints. And steep slopes don't appear to impact retained Lot B, and the reduced setback from the cold water lake is also not required for this portion of the property. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. District staff provided comments which were included in the report package. Their requested conditions have been included within the consent conditions. and through staff's review and analysis, the applications appear to meet the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. As such, staff are recommending approval. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. I'll call on the applicant or representative to make any comments.
Good morning, Chair, or good afternoon, Chair Store, members
Good
of
afternoon.
the committee. John P. Gallagher and Associates. I'm here with Neil and Lori Monkman, the owners of the subject lands. I think Madeline has explained the application quite well. There's just a few points that we want to touch upon. We met with the town early on in the process to ensure that the pre-consultation matters were met. Throughout the time, we've also had Lori and Neil at great expense purchase the original shore road allowance and the shore road allowance to the west side. And in speaking with Marie Turner, that's just nearing completion right now. The applicants have come up with a plan that respects the lay of the land. As Madeline has stated, there are steep slopes. Originally, this was about 23 lots on an old plan of subdivision. And the previous owner was approached at one time by the District of Muskoka to acquire a lot of land along that south portage for widening. And that created pretty much a drop off in that area. As part of the signing off on that, the district provided them an access in the location of that road allowance on the west boundary of the property. And that's how those two lots will be accessed. The existing cottage is accessed off of Monkman Lane, which is on the other side of the bay. And my clients own the lot to the north of that one as well. As Madeline has stated, all the lots are excessive in their frontage. A single detached dwelling is proposed for each with a shoreline structure. We had Riverstone Environmental and Kevin from KPK Survey identify some of the constraints on site to refine the development envelopes. And it made sense to basically have the last retained lot at 0.8 hectares, which is still 2 acres in lot size. And just to put some context to that, previous lots created south of that lot are about 200 feet and 1 acre lot size, and that was approved by the Committee of Adjustment previously. As Madeline has stated, the total shoreline is type 2 fish habitat, so we don't have that same level of impact on the type 1 fish habitat. All the septic systems will be set back 30 meters from the present high water mark. The building sites are well above the floodplain for the lake. There are no wildland fire hazard risks on the site. And the majority of the lots, given the controls that are being imposed through the decision, through the recommendations of Al's report, and eventually the CPP, will limit vegetation clearing and retain vegetation on the steep slopes, etc. The property is a linear residential development that's in keeping with lots in the area. The plan is to have the dwellings blend into the natural vegetation without having substantial alteration of the existing site. We have selective tree cutting proposed and minimum disturbance to the lot. There is an existing driveway that currently services that portion of the lands, and that would be the driveway that we've allocated as part of the road closure on the west side. The deal was such that they would be getting right of way over the neighbor's portion that they're buying, and again, to try and avoid filling in steeper areas. That location has great visibility, lots of sight lines either way on there. The existing cottage will continue to use the existing entrance there. My clients have done some interior fixing up of the cottage and propose to rebuild the existing legal non-conforming boathouse that is on the site there and contribute to the municipality. The locations take into account side yard setbacks, as we have these extensive frontages on the lots. There's ample room between the lots for placement of buildings. Any new buildings in the future would be built according to the current OBC of the day. With regards to the district official plan, the application conforms with the district official plan, and we saw the conditions requested. And again, staff have taken that into account in the decision of the application. Lastly, the application is consistent with the PPS by allowing proper use of the existing infrastructure. It will provide employment opportunities and housing while meeting the servicing policies of the statement. The implementation of the zoning and the CPP will ensure the protection of the environment. The location of the access and the building sites are well above the flood elevation for Lake Bays. There's no flood hazard with the location of the envelopes. As Madeline had stated, the proposal is to zone the lands into the WR1 and with site-specific exceptions. I did make Madeline aware of the draft bylaw needing a small adjustment from the agenda, that one is a 20-meter setback as per the first page of the report, so that it was consistent. The other ones are 30 meters back, and that also on that retained lot deals with the steep slope setback as well on that one. In my professional opinion, the proposed consent and zoning to implement it are consistent with the PPS. They conform to the district official plan and the Huntsville official plan. The applications as submitted are appropriate and represent good planning. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have any. Neil and Lori are here if there's questions that I can't answer. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Would anyone present wish to speak to this application? I see no one jumping up. Would anyone online like to speak to this application? If you would like to, you'll need to raise your electronic hand.
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
All right. Thank you very much. Council members, any comments or questions? Deputy Mayor Armour.
Thanks, Chair Stone. Just a comment. I'm glad to see they bought the shore road allowance. That's a great thing. Going forward for sure.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm sure that will provide some significant resources for the municipalities in operations.
It's a lot of shoreline. All right, moved by Councilor Schumacher, seconded by Councilor Cloutier. Be it resolved that Planning Council approve Community Planning Permit Bylaw Amendment Application CPPA 28-2024-HTE, the purpose and effect of which is to change the precinct on the lands from a waterfront residential 120-meter precinct to a waterfront residential 60-meter precinct and a waterfront residential 120-meter with exception X precinct and a waterfront residential 60-meter with exception Y precinct as follows. To reduce the front yard setback from a cold water lake from 30 meters to 20 meters, restrict development on the lot to the identified building envelope as shown on attachment schedule, and to prohibit development until the actions and recommendations of the slope setback assessment prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions, Inc., dated August 11, 2024, are implemented to the satisfaction of the town of Huntsville through a community planning permit. And exception Y, to permit a lot with a minimum lot area of 0.8 hectares to restrict development on the lot to the identified building envelope as shown on the attached schedule and to prohibit development until actions and recommendations of the slope setback assessment prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions, Inc., dated August 11, 2024, are implemented to the satisfaction of Town of Huntsville through a community planning permit. All to permit the creation of 2 new waterfront residential lots. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that's carried. All right. Madeline, you are staying with us and you're speaking to the Tinkler application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 209 Ravens Glen Drive. I'll just wait for the presentation. Nope. Perfect. The lot is designated residential within Huntsville's urban settlement area in the official plan and is under the urban residential low precinct in the community planning permit bylaw. A community planning permit bylaw amendment application was submitted to change the precinct on the lands from an urban residential low precinct to an urban residential low with exception X precinct to recognize Ravenscliff Road as the front lot line. The site-specific exception would only be applied to the retained lot as shown hatched in green on the screen. Additionally, a concurrent consent application was submitted for the creation of 1 new urban residential lot. The severed lot is vacant and proposed to have an area of approximately 600 square meters with 22.4 meters of frontage on Ravenscliff Road. The retained lot will contain the existing detached dwelling, which is proposed to have an area of approximately 798 square meters with 29.7 meters of frontage on Ravenscliff Road. The conditions of consent have been included on the screen. These include the standard conditions along with conditions to remove an existing shed from the severed lot, the community planning permit bylaw amendment being approved, and conditions requested by the District of Muskoka. The site-specific exception is considered technical as lot frontage for a corner lot is determined to be the shorter property line abutting the public street. In this instance, for the retained lot, the distance along Ravens Glen Drive is approximately 3 meters shorter than the distance along Ravenscliff Road. However, recognizing Ravenscliff Road as the front lot line would allow the existing dwelling to meet all required lot setback standards and would be appropriate as the dwelling is currently oriented facing Ravenscliff Road. Additionally, new lots within the urban residential low precinct that are on full municipal water and sewer services are required to have a minimum lot area of 465 square meters and a minimum frontage of 15 meters. Both the severed and retained lots would exceed the minimum frontage and area requirements in this instance. While the official plan contains no minimum lot area or frontage requirements for the urban residential designation, the policies do note that residential development is designed in such a way to minimize land consumption and efficiently use infrastructure and community facilities. In this instance, as the proposed new lot is within a built-up area with access to public infrastructure and services, this would allow for development that is compact in form and at an appropriate scale to the surrounding area. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. District staff provided comments which were included in the report package, and their requested conditions have been included within the consent conditions. Through staff's review and analysis, the applications appear to meet the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial planning statement. As such, staff are recommending approval. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I'll call on the applicant or representative to make any comments. Seeing no one jumping up. If you are online, applicant or representative, you need to raise your electronic hand.
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
No hands. Madeline?
The applicants had confirmed that they wouldn't be able to make it to the meeting today.
All right. That helps us out. Would anyone like to speak to this application? Both in person or online?
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
Thank you very much. Council members, any comments or questions? Council Cluche.
Through you, Chair. Just want to know, are the entranceway where the pine trees are those trees on district property or are they on the property of the owner?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. I believe they are partially on the district road allowance and partially on the private lands. There was a property stake in, I can bring it up on the slide if you'd like to see it.
I saw the property stake, but I couldn't make out exactly what
They-
side they were on.
Likely they're straddling the property line and the road allowance. I can bring it up if you'd like.
No, that's
No?
fine. I
Okay.
just didn't know who would be responsible for taking those out. Whether the applicant would have to pay for that or we would.
No. Any other comments or questions? All right. Moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that Planning Council approve Community Planning Permit Bylaw Amendment Application CPPA 30-2024-HTE, the purpose and effect of which is to change the precinct on the lands from an urban residential low precinct to an urban residential low with exception X precinct to recognize Ravenscliff Road as the front lot line. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that's carried. All right, thanks, Madeline. Kelsey's going to speak to the application on Morgan's Road.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 83 Morgan's Road. The property is within the rural designation of the official plan and within the rural precinct and flood zone precinct with natural constraint 1, 2, and flood overlays within the community planning permit bylaw. The applicant is proposing to change the precinct on the subject lands from rural to rural with exception and conservation precinct. The purpose of the exception is to recognize the existing accessory uses. The existing accessory uses include a private functions venue and outdoor recreational use. A private functions venue is defined as an accessory use of lands, buildings, and structures as existing on the date of the passing of the bylaw, should it be passed, as a venue for private functions such as weddings, receptions, family reunions, retirement parties, community events, or similar private events for a maximum of 70 guests. As the wetlands are located on the site, a conservation precinct will be applied to these lands. The rural precinct does not permit these accessory uses as of right, therefore the amendment is required. Both accessory uses are existing non-conforming uses on the property. The property used to house a bed and breakfast until 2021, which was a permitted accessory use to the RU precinct. Through the operation of the bed and breakfast, the property hosted traveling public and the local community offering the outdoor recreational use. Once the bed and breakfast ceased operations in 2021, the property continued to be utilized for the outdoor recreational uses and began to be utilized for private functions, in addition to the continued residential use. Looking at the parking requirements within the CPP bylaw, there is no specific parking requirement for these uses. However, there is policy which states if the parking requirements are not listed, it's supposed to be one space per 25 square meters of gross floor area. Based on the area of the buildings which house the private function, which are the barn and the gazebo, it would be 11 parking spaces. However, given the nature of private functions, similar uses within the parking requirement table would be a restaurant or a banquet facility or a place of assembly. These require one parking space for 4 people. The applicant indicated that the maximum would be 70 people per event. Based on this parking standard, the use would require a minimum of 18 parking spaces, which are provided in the existing parking area, which you can see here. And then when we look at the outdoor recreational use, there's no building directly linked with this, except some minor structures. Although it is anticipated that the less parking demand will be associated with this proposed accessory use, and the 2 uses will not be used concurrently. Therefore, it's anticipating that the parking can be accommodated for this use as well. Within the rural designation, it allows for single detached dwellings located on larger lots than rural businesses. Rural businesses generally include land-intensive resource management, small-scale businesses, business related to the rural area, and tourist commercial. Rural businesses will generally also be of a type and scale which serve the needs of the surrounding community and commercial service area. In this proposal, the existing development serves both the public and seasonal residents of the surrounding community, as well as the traveling public. Natural constraint mapping identifies wetlands and steep slope areas. The existing development and uses are outside of these areas, so there's no concerns. And the wetland, it's a best practice within our official plan. Once there's a wetland identified, it's under the natural constraint overlay, but to add them to our natural heritage area through a conservation precinct to ensure that no development or site alteration can occur. District staff reviewed the application and have no objection to the proposal. The application was circulated internally in accordance with the Planning Act. 31 letters of support were provided for the applications from neighbors, community partners, vendors, and patrons. There are 9 letters from neighbors, 9 letters from community partners, 9 letters from vendors, and 4 letters from patrons. There were also 3 letters of concern. One appeared to relate to access, which seemed more civil in nature. And then there was some other letters concerned with traffic and the capacity of Morgan's Road. One commenter suggested limiting capacity and timings of event and increased signage for the road. With the private functions event venue, staff recommended a maximum of 70 people, which is included in the recommendation. And then also building had comments about a change of use permit for the barn. Through staff's review and analysis, the application would appear to conform with the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending approval. Thank you so much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. I'll call on the applicant or representative to make any comments.
Well, good afternoon, Chair, Committee. My name is Melissa Markham Planning and Associates, 1025 Rebecca Lane, Huntsville, Ontario, P1H2J6. I'm here today on behalf of the owners of the subject lands, Jamie Hondrick and Pam Carnahan. The owners, as you can see, are also here today. I was retained by the owners to assist with this planning application to permit private functions and outdoor recreational uses which are existing on the subject lands, and they have been located in defined portions of the subject lands, not the entirety. Through discussions with the town, it was determined that a zoning bylaw amendment application would be required. And specifically, the application will change the precinct from a rural to a rural with an exception to permit these uses. The property, as you heard, is developed with a dwelling, barn, sheds, shoreline structures, and a gazebo, and no additional development is being proposed through the application. The owners and I have read the staff report and agree with the recommendations in the report, and we'd also like to thank staff for their assistance with the owners through this process. As you heard from staff, the lands are designated rural and are within the rural precinct and the town CPP bylaw. The subject lands are approximately 74 acres, which is 30 hectares, and have over 984 feet or 300 meters of frontage along Morgan's Road. The lands are heavily wooded and a portion have been identified as wetlands, as you've heard. As mentioned, no physical development is proposed through the application. It's the natural wooded nature of these lands that make this the perfect location for these uses. The surrounding lands are rural and residential, exists along Morgan's Road, and the lands to the south are within Hidden Valley. My submitted planning report includes full planning overview of the policy applicable to the subject lands and the uses. So I won't go into a full detail of the planning report. However, the planning justification provided in my report was accepted by staff to permit the additional uses through their recommendation. The lands are rural and the provincial planning statement provides these areas should be supported by providing opportunities for sustainable and diversified tourism, including leveraging natural assets. The district and town official plans support tourism and the establishment of small and home-based businesses. The district official plan even provides for these as standalone uses. However, the application proposes that these be together or accessory with the residential use to ensure on-site management of these of the events. The uses preserve the natural character of the area and contribute to the economy of Muskoka through goods and services and tourism. The subject lands are a large lot, and the proposed uses are occupying only a very small portion of the lot. It does not dominate the landscape, and they're not visually impactful from outside of the lands. The CPP bylaw permits a range of rural uses in the rural precinct. However, a private functions venue and/or the outdoor recreational events is not specifically permitted. The application proposes these, once again, accessory to the residential use, and the definition of a private functions venue was included as an accessory use of the lands, buildings, and structures as existed on the date of passing of the bylaw as a venue for private functions such as weddings, receptions, family reunions, retirement parties, community events, or similar events to a maximum of 70 guests. Specific locations have been provided on the subject lands for these venues, which are located centrally on the property. These uses rely on the natural setting of the lands for their appeal to these users. And as provided, these uses will exist along with the residential use to ensure that the owners of the property are available and on-site during these events. When looking at these types of uses, impacts are evaluated to ensure no negative impact on the surrounding area. As provided, there's on-site management. The structures and areas identified for the uses are located centrally, and parking has been provided in an existing parking area which meets and exceeds the minimum required for this use. The owners are seeking through the application to provide approximately 15 to 20 of these events each year, with a maximum of 70 people at each event. As part of the application, as you heard, the owners were able to provide letters of support from local businesses that cater to these events, organizations that need these events for their functions, and surrounding property owners. A few letters from people that have rented their facility were also submitted. In total, you heard there were over 31 letters of support. The owners did limit the submission of these letters to 9 per use in terms to capture the essence of what it is that they're providing on the property. However, we're aware that hundreds of letters of support could have been provided for this use. We're also aware there are no concerns raised by the district or internal departments or agencies. However, 2 letters of concern were posted to the agenda for today's meeting, and a third was received from us before the meeting today. The first letter provided comments regarding access, which I believe were identified by planning staff, more of legal rights or civil matter. Once again, there's no development that's proposed on the application, and there's no intent to landlock anything or a severance through this process. The second letter provided outdoor activities that have previously occurred have not generated a lot of noise and with limited additional traffic. There were comments provided that a celebration of life was held at this location with a larger attendance. That was the one function that was held that did exceed the number of people that the owners were aware would be attending. However, at that point, it was out of the control of the owners to know how many people would be attending this function. They were also aware that as soon as one car parks on a road, most people follow, and they did not go into the parking area on the property to park in the location provided. Once again, these facilities could be managed in future to ensure that people are parking on the property. Once again, this type of celebration could also occur at somebody's house, not just this facility, and there'd be no limitation on the number of people that would be in attendance. The letter further provided concerns with the municipal road, which I believe were talked about by staff as well. And once again, it was only one event that generated this significant amount of traffic. It's not an ongoing concern. The letter received today also stated that they are a resident on Morgan's Road. They have no problems with events. Once again, they would like to limit the number of guests to a maximum on the property, which has been included in the bylaw. We believe the proposed bylaw addresses the planning concerns of those residents with concerns. As provided, we're here looking for approval of the application as set out in the staff report. And the owner is also here to speak to the application, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Pam, did you want to say something?
I'd just like to say thank you for listening to our application and to take it so seriously. We are members of this community that are very community-minded, and our community as a whole, but specifically our neighborhood, is very much utmost in our thinking, and it is always taken into consideration. So we have heard from our neighbors, we understand what the concerns are, and we've tried our best to mitigate any situations whatsoever. The situation with the celebrations of life, we will not be forwarding that again. Those were three very special people that were very close to us and close to the property that requested such an event. And we don't see ourselves going forward with that because we did recognize that that is problematic for traffic. We are also looking at, like, we are also concerned about noise and making sure that the events take place in a nice, reasonable manner where everyone is respectful of the land and respectful of our neighbors. And so we are always on site to manage and make sure that none of these events are just out of control in any way, shape, or form. So it's our responsibility, and we take it very seriously.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I will go to members of the public. Is there anyone present that would like to speak to this application? Please come down, sir. I need you to come to the microphone so people on the internet can hear you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the opportunity to make input into this process. I just have a couple of concerns. My wife is with me, Deanne O'Donoghue. We live at on Morgan's Road. We're neighbors of the applicants, and we have just a couple of things that we'd like to say about the application. We have submitted made a submission earlier, I guess it was last week, on this, and I just want to really quickly summarize what our thoughts are on this application. What our concern, what our real concern is that Morgan's Road has limited capacity, a limited traffic capacity. If you're aware of Morgan's Road, it's a small road running, I guess, east off Highway 60, about 2 kilometers. It was built sometime in the mid-1880s to standards of the day. Those standards of the day are not today's standards. It's a pretty, it's a lovely little road. The town has maintained it very, very well, and we're very appreciative of that over time. However, there are some issues with Morgan's Road that that sort of bump into this application, I believe. The road has a number of turns and curves, blind turns and curves in it, some hills in it that they're blind hills. And every time I drive it, and I've driven it for a long, long time, every time I drive it, I've kind of hold on my steering wheel pretty tight, because there are some locations there that you don't know what you're going to come across at the top of the hill or around the bend. It's a traffic issue. It's a safety concern. There have been accidents in the past, and there are some personal injury accidents in the past on that road. So I know people might say, well, if you're driving on a road, there's traffic risk. Driving on Morgan's Road, there's a little more traffic risk. I think the 16 or 18 residences that are on the road adequately services those people, but any increased traffic is going to result in increased road issues. So I really just wanted to say that with the condition of the road, with the situation with the road, it is a concern. the events functions that have happened in the past, the small functions, I don't believe there's been any issue, any road issue, any traffic issue with what's happened in the past. It hasn't been an issue. What we're really looking at, or what we're thinking about, is that if we recognize, if council recognizes the fact that this is an events function location, that if there are not conditions dealing with that, that situation, that in the future, larger events, more frequent events, are going to result in increased traffic. So it's more of a futures thing that we're looking at rather than an immediate issue with what has occurred there recently. So what I am saying, or what we are saying, is that if we are considering approval of this application, what we're strongly suggesting is that with the standards in the bylaw that are established, I heard today that there's a standard being included of 70 people as a maximum capacity. So that would limit the traffic. Now, it's maybe what has happened in the past, which seems to be fine. Frequency of meetings would also be important, because the more frequent event you have, the more traffic you do have, and again, it leads to issues. So capacity limits 70 is fine if that's included in the bylaw. Frequency, number of events that occur throughout the season would be very useful. We'd like to see that, and signage. Signage is really important. If you've driven that road, at night, there are some concerns. It would be important to, if you're increasing traffic, any increase in traffic, even for the existing traffic, signage would be helpful about on the bad curves and the bad hills there, because there are blind curves and there are blind hills, and you don't see what's happening until you're there. So signage, and then signage related to events to minimize the amount of traffic that does have to go up the road. Morgan's Road is about 2 kilometers. The road into the event center is about, I don't know, a third of that, maybe a half a kilometer up. But people do miss the event. They do drive up, or they drive the road, and sometimes they're in a hurry, and sometimes they're not. But it's traffic, and so that's what we're thinking about, and thinking about increased traffic with potential if there were not controls established. So that's all that I wanted to say, and thank you very much for the opportunity to make comments.
Thank you for your input. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak to the application? Is there anyone online that would like to speak to the application?
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
Thank you. Council members, any comments or questions? Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Chair Stone, and through you. I definitely appreciate local traffic concerns. That's valid when you put a bit of a commercial use, but I wonder if there's any data to show that there's been any increase in accidents since the commercial enterprises come in. If there is some data, I'd love to see that. Personally, I think what the applicants have created here is a bit of a gem in our town. It's a really cool facility that thankfully the public gets to use. On a funny scale, that it was the last thing I did before COVID happened. We had a corporate event there. It was a lot of fun, and the next day I never saw my colleagues for about 4 months. But it was a lot of fun. I think it's really cool. I know that on the HMATA board and with the chamber, it's a location that is used for a lot of really cool things. So I support it. I think some of the discussion they had about trying to limit cars on the road is really, really positive. And I think that they will do that, and they should maybe discuss with the neighbor to make sure that that's consistent. But other than that, I support this, and I think it's great for the town.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair Stone. I agree with Councillor Morrison's comments, and I just have a few light comments. Mr. Hondrick was my geography teacher in high school for 1 year during my very turbulent career at HHS. I received a very poor mark in his class. My parents were very disappointed in me. And I tried to tell them that it had nothing to do with how poor a student I was, but they didn't believe me. So I'm pretty sure Mr. Hondrick was glad I was just in his class for 1 year. I'm happy to see that your business is having success. And despite the very low mark you gave me, I'm very glad to support this application.
I believe the mayor would like to speak.
Thank you, Chair Stone, and it's very hard to follow Councillor Clark's comments. I just want to echo what I heard. I appreciate the comments made by the Hendricks mayor neighbors, but I do believe that planning staff and the applicant have worked out, a reasonable approach as to capacity and all of those things. I agree. This is a real gem in our community, and it supports sustainable and diverse tourism. And I absolutely wholeheartedly support this. I think it's great.
Councillor Cloutier.
Through you, Chair. I've been back to this chunk of property. It's very beautiful back in there. Just a thought, if you're having a bigger event, maybe you can arrange alternate transportation as to maybe parking somewhere and busing people in and on a larger event, that would probably sustain a lot of traffic off the road. If
we encourage buses and sort of that sort of system, small buses only.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Which has been utilized by most of our clients. And
Yeah.
Okay.
And we also heard our neighbors speak to the fact that if they missed our sign because it's allowed on signage setbacks, we had to put a second. So we put a sandwich board out on the day of.
Yep.
Indicating there's a wedding and to turn immediately at that.
Okay.
So that no one can go further down.
All right. Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Armour.
Thanks, Chair Stone. Just a quick comment. We do have the chair and the co-chair of the Public Works Department here, so maybe they can address your issues with the road with a little bit more signage for blind curves and stuff like that. We do supply those, so I'll put it on their slate, and I'm sure they'll get some signage done on the road for you.
Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I will be brief, but I too echo the comments around the table from my fellow colleagues here. I have been to this venue many times, and not just from a wedding perspective, but from an arts perspective. And Pam and I go way back when it comes to art, and we've had shows at the barn and the venue. So the amount of letters and appreciation that have come forward, and the fact that you had to limit them to 9 for each speaks volumes. So I certainly I applaud what you've done for the community and what you continue to do, and I wholeheartedly support this,
All right.
application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, Chair Stone. Again, concur, I've been out there as well, and I know you guys have encouraged even like carpooling when people get together for events. I've done a birthday out there, and yeah, looking forward to this. This is a great opportunity, and see some wedding dresses throwing axes. It'll be fun.
All right. Before I read the motion, I also was surprised by the number of letters of support. It's obviously a great venue. I haven't been invited yet. But most importantly, I know you're both great stewards of the land, and that goes a long way with this council. Moved by Deputy Mayor Armour, seconded by Mayor Alcock. Be it resolved that Planning Council approve Community Planning Permit Bylaw Amendment Application CPPA 27-2024 HTE, the purpose and effect of which is to change the precinct on the lands from a rural precinct to a rural with exception precinct, to recognize the existing private functions venue and outdoor recreational use as permitted accessory uses on the lot, and included a site-specific definition for private functions venue, and from a rural precinct to a conservation precinct. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that carries unanimously. All right. Now that all comments have been received, I declare these public meetings respecting the above applications to be concluded, and we will now move to the non-public portion of the meeting. And Kelsey is staying out with us to speak to the Cairns Crescent application.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 20 Cairns Crescent. The property is within the urban residential designation in the official plan and within the urban residential high precinct with site-specific exception R31832 and natural constraint 2 overlay. The application has been submitted to permit the construction of a 4-story, 185-unit multiple dwelling development. The applicant proposes variations to the development standards through Class 3 community planning permit to increase the permitted building height from 11 meters to 17.2 meters, increase the permitted residential density from 60 meters per gross hectare to 85 units per gross hectare, reduce the minimum required northern interior side yard setback for a multiple dwelling from 6 meters to 3.2 meters, reduce the minimum required number of parking spaces from 267 spaces to 231, reduce the minimum required number of designated accessible spaces from 9 to 7, reduce the number of required loading spaces from 3 to 1, and permit a driveway associated with a multiple dwelling use within 1.5 meters of a lot land abutting urban residential low precinct. So just kind of highlighted on screen the kind of northern lot line along Cairns Crescent, and then the driveway associated with the building and to the abutting residential low areas. Here are some elevations of the property. The proposed use complies with the precinct except where variations are needed. Section 1.2 of the CPP bylaw discusses 5 criteria that must be addressed when evaluating variations. The compliance of this criteria must be demonstrated prior to an issuance of a community planning permit. A number of studies were provided in support of the application and to address the criteria, which were outlined in the report, and I will briefly summarize. So I'll just quickly look at the elevations. This works. Oops. I forget if you hold it. Oh, there we go. So this is the U shape of the building facing inward to the south. And then this is what would be facing Cairns Crescent. And then there's just another look at the elevations. The site plan and architectural plans show the detailed site layout elevations rendering for the proposed building. The 4-story building is designed in a U shape on the north half of the subject lands with surface parking and partial parking below parking below grade. The plan shows 136 one-bedroom units, 8 one-bedroom units plus den, 16 two-bedroom units, 16 two-bedroom units with den, and 8 3-bedroom units. The development also offers amenity spaces, both indoors and outdoors. The building is oriented closer to Cairns Crescent, and the southern portion of the property, which is sloped, is left to be undisturbed at the very back of the property. Looking at the topography, the building's positioning requires less grading and site alteration. However, in positioning the building closer to Cairns Crescent, the multiple dwelling is closer to the abutting existing low-density residential uses. As the building is oriented in a southern direction, the main entrance will lead to the parking area, and the rear of the building will face Cairns Crescent, as I showed in the elevations. Comments have been provided to the applicant to further consider the positioning of the building and the orientation and appearance from Cairns Crescent. The applicant has also provided this other rendering of the building with a mansard roof for your reference. A scoped environmental impact study was provided, which reviewed the natural heritage features, habitat for endangered and threatened species, significant wildlife habitat, and provided recommendations. Field investigations included an assessment of deer wintering habitat stratum 2, which was identified on the property. And based on the forest communities, it's not expected to provide deer wintering habitat as it's classified, given that it's not close to any stratum 1 deer habitat, which is highly dense in conifers and allows the deer to move around in the winter. So no evidence was observed to indicate that the subject property is used for significant bedding and foraging activities. Therefore, there were no noted concerns that the tree removal would remove vital winter cover for the deer. General mitigation measures were included, such as vegetation removal outside of the breeding bird season and bat roosting period. A tree inventory and preservation plan were also provided. Deciduous trees greater than 6 centimeters in diameter at breast height and coniferous trees greater than 2 meters in height in the woodland were identified. Tree removal closer to Cairns Crescents has been recommended, where there's tree retention recommended closer to the southern property line where the slopes are. Looking at the plan and report, it appears that there may be an opportunity to retain more trees along the northern and northwestern and eastern interior lot lines to ensure a vegetated buffer between the proposed development and the adjacent low-density residential uses if the building could be shifted away from these lot lines. A traffic impact study was submitted and details the traffic impact study, parking review, and site plan review. It assessed the existing road network and future consistent conditions and predicted manageable increases in traffic with expected development without necessitating operational improvements. And in the parking review, the planned 131 parking spaces, which is 36 below the standard, was deemed sufficient when reviewed to comparable municipalities. Looking at the study, it appears, however, that the intersection of Kitchen Road South and Main Street were excluded from the scope, as well as analysis of pedestrian connectivity and consideration for upgrades of Kitchen Road South. Staff have requested further considerations of these matters. Functional servicing report was also provided to assess future stormwater, sanitary, sewer, water supply, and site grading. The report proposes on-site detention pond on the northwest corner of the property and concludes that the stormwater discharge will be controlled to pre-development levels. Sanitary will be connected to Cairns Crescent, as well as the water connection. Operations staff from the district and town have reviewed the report and provided technical comments to be addressed prior to consideration of this application. Looking at the supporting documentation, further information is needed to provide effective analysis of the criteria within the CPP bylaw. The urban residential designation generally encourages intensification through the built-up area, which permits high-density, low-rise apartments, such as this one. The proposed development would introduce a residential density of approximately 85 units per hectare, which exceeds the 60 units per hectare high density within the official plan. When considering increases to density, we also have to look at community benefits that are in relation to the increase. The applicant is proposing to develop the 185 purpose-built rental building with smart value housing, affordable housing, in conjunction with the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation or through the Muskoka Affordable Housing Initiatives Program. The number of smart value housing units has not been confirmed, as these programs require planning approvals first. The building will also have sustainable features such as a green roof. When developing medium to high residential density, considerations must be assessed for compatibility. This includes compatibility with existing land uses in the immediate area, where adjacent to low-density residential in terms of vegetated buffers and setbacks that are significant to mitigate those visual impacts. Transitional areas with the low-density residential uses abutting the property. It is abutting industrial and high-density uses on the one side, but low-density on the other. So we've asked for further considerations of those uses directly abutting. District engineering and public works staff commented in review of this application, which are contained in attachment 4 of this report. Their comments suggested provisional conditions for adequate infrastructure, water and sewer services, hydraulic modeling, and a peer review of the traffic impact study and the implementations of the recommendations of the EIS. The application was circulated in accordance with the CPP bylaw and the Planning Act. The applicant also carried out one-on-one meetings with councillors, door-to-door in-person discussions, and mail drops with the immediate neighbors, as well as held a virtual open house this past Monday on the November the 11th. 15 letters of objection were provided, which described concerns regarding the visual appearance, height, density, the reduced setbacks to abutting low-density residential, servicing constraints, and surrounding road capacity and conditions. All comments have been provided to the applicant for further consideration of visual impacts and mitigation measures for abutting low-density residential, as well as requested updates for the functional servicing report, stormwater management report, and traffic impact study, in addition to all the other noted comments. Once updated reports have been received and issues raised in this report and the public comments have been addressed, staff will be in the position to provide a recommendation in relation to this application. Thank you so much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. I believe the applicant is online and will be making a presentation.
Yes, I will bring them into the meeting now.
Great.
Good afternoon, committee members of council and staff. My name is Evan Sugden. I'm a professional land use planner with the Biglieri Group, and we are the urban planners for the owner and applicant.
Welcome.
Thank you. We have a presentation that is maybe a little bit longer than brief, but I think that the proposal, warrants around 10 minutes or so. I'm going to try to go through it fast. Some of you have seen it, some of you have not. So I'll try to keep the details on point, but thanks. Can everybody see it? It looks like Kelsey is maybe sharing.
Yes, we
this
can.
already.
Yep, excellent.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so through the chair, thank you for having me today. We're here today to present to the Town of Huntsville Planning Council this application for what I believe is much needed purpose-built rental housing, and hopefully also truly affordable housing units as a part of this development. Next slide, please. So what I'll try to walk you through is the introduction to the site, its municipal context, the land use planning context a little bit, and go over a bit more detail on the actual proposal, and then what the planning applications are to facilitate this development, along with some of the supporting materials that were provided, and then what we think next steps are, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. Next slide, please. Okay, so the subject site here is located in the southern end of town. This is a site that is irregularly shaped, quite large, and located in a unique kind of mixed-use area. It's generally on the periphery of a residential neighborhood that's not yet fully built out. And it's a site that's located in proximity to a couple of critical things. One, the major road network. The highway giving access to inter-municipal opportunities, so places like North Bay or Bracebridge or Gravenhurst, as well as the Main Street connection to downtown. It's also within 400 meters of a few amenities, things like the Farm Co-op for food, the Algonquin Deli, and then also, and importantly for a development like purpose-built rental, it's in proximity to Muskoka's very limited but available transit service. So through the district transit service and the town's on-demand transit service, there's a stop within a 5-minute walk. So 400 meters is generally considered a 5-minute walk here. And we've heard from residents and town that there's limited sidewalks, and so that is going to be something where we're taking back with our client. Next slide, please. So this is that context I just described in a little bit more detail. You can see the Route 11 line in yellow there, as well as the downtown, and some of the surrounding amenities that provide this site with a good location for infill intensification. So the subject site within the town of Huntsville official plan is within the urban area boundary. So, you know, we have essentially two sort of broad areas in most municipalities: the urban area where growth and development is planned, and the non-urban area where limited growth and development is planned or countryside uses are intended. Muskoka is also unique in that it has lakeshore development, which is a bit different than other municipalities, but this is one of the properties in the urban area intended for some growth and development. Next slide, please. It's designated urban residential in the town official plan. This is a use that permits low to medium density buildings, residential buildings, including apartments. And so what we're proposing here is a permitted use in the official plan. Next slide, please. The Huntsville Community Planning Permit Bylaw is a recent document, and in this document, we are one of a few parcels in this area of town that is actually purposefully intended to be high density. So this is high density residential urban land. This is the type of land that the town has set out for this type of use. This has been in process for a number of years. The bylaw was passed in 2022 with a long public consultation period prior to that coming into force. So what we have here is one of the spots in the town where we are directed to put this type of building. Next slide, please. So the proposal. I heard a couple of statements today on the fact that the proposals that requested for other applications were actually amending the CPP bylaw. So for this proposal, we are not proposing an amendment. This is actually one of the allowable permits within that bylaw. So this is a permitted use. We need some exceptions to accommodate a very unique site layout. It's not a large rectangle. It has the area for a building in it, but because of the unique shape and because of the topography and because of the requirement to make a pro forma work for a purpose-built rental with affordable units, we need some flexibility, and that's exactly what that CPP bylaw allows here. It allows us to take some variations in return for community benefits. So what's being proposed is over 180 new purpose-built rental units. The owner is actually willing to go as high as 25% of all of those units as affordable housing. We have been in discussions with staff about formalizing this. So one of the ways we achieve affordable housing, and the only way on this site, is to get the funding through granting programs. So CMHC or Muskoka District, or perhaps a combination of the two. However, those programs require approval in order to get that funding. So it's a little bit of a cart before the horse situation. And in discussions with staff, you know, we have discussed internally and are open to signing an agreement to ensure that that housing occurs. However, if it has to be done through an agreement, the amount can't be as high as 25%. And that's simply to protect the owner in the event that something financially happens, family trouble, bankruptcy, or some emergency resale needs to occur. He needs to be able to protect his resale opportunity. So allowing up to 25% will get us the full grant that the district can offer. So that is on the table. And also the building is proposing a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. 3 bedroom units is quite unique for purpose-built rental. What it does is it allows families that maybe can't afford to get into things like the semi-detached house or the townhouse or the single, but still have a family and live in that more vertical environment for the long term. It also includes a height of 4 stories. So the actual number of stories has always been 4. However, we're proposing a range of heights here between just over 17 meters and just over 19. The reason for that range is because of a request we've had for sort of a more Muskoka aesthetic. So we have a flat roof version and we've got a mansard roof version. The mansard roof version is a bit more of the Muskoka aesthetic. That actually increases the height by a couple of meters. It has Excuse me, I'm battling a bit of a cough, so I apologize for coughing in your ears. A slight reduction in the number of parking spaces. That's due to the fact that most purpose-built rental buildings don't have the same uptake on parking spaces as condos do. Understanding that Muskoka is still a largely vehicle-dependent town, we have still provided a lot of spaces for these units, and we have a unique site configuration that helps create that. Just over quite a bit of GFA when you actually look at the numbers there. And then we have a green roof. So the green roof is intended for three things. One is for a bit of an aesthetic purpose, but more importantly, it's functional and practical, and it helps retain stormwater management on site on top of the building. So it actually helps with the engineering work. And the third thing is that it contributes to sustainable building practices. So one of the town's sort of credits you get for increased height and density is if you introduce a sustainable building practice. And so that's one of the reasons amongst the affordable housing and the purpose-built rental that we're using to rationalize that increased height and that increased density. Next slide, please, Kelsey. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but I wanted to point out a couple of things that we've tried to purposely do with this building orientation and site design. So you can see it's a very irregular shape. And Kelsey's gone over this a little bit already. But one of the things we've tried to do is two things: accommodate the site's topography, which has quite a change from the road to the back of the lot, which is just over about 50 feet. So we're putting the building on the lower end of the site. We're also putting it closer to the shared lot lines that you see here, in order to put the parking to the rear. What the parking to the rear does is it allows the building to create a physical shield from traffic glare. So in the night, in the wintertime especially, when people are driving back there to park or you're getting deliveries, the neighbors aren't seeing headlights shine into their backyards at all times. So the building actually creates a bit of a physical barrier. And then pushing it to the north like this, what it does is it uses the slope on the site to its advantage. It allows us to put more parking on site without any blasting. And so we're cognizant of blasting because not only is it expensive, but it can be disruptive to the community at times if it's not done properly. So we're trying to minimize as much blasting as possible by using that topography. So it also gives us an opportunity to put some of the parking at what we'll call a quasi P1 level. It's not a full-on below-grade parking level, but it uses that slope on the site to put the parking under the first floor. You can see that the stormwater pond Kelsey had mentioned earlier there in the corner. Thank you, Kelsey. Since we've had discussions with staff and have received comments today, we're actually considering shifting the building to the south and west a little bit, so down and to the left. What that'll do is it'll give us more room to move the driveway to Cairns Crescent over to create a space for a vegetative buffer, potentially even losing less trees, or at least giving us room to plant new trees and help that interface between the neighbors. And as well, we're asking for a variance at one pinch point there in the northwest corner of the building, which is about 3.5 meters. Thanks, Kelsey. Right now, we're proposing a privacy fence, so a solid wood fence to help with the interface. But if we can move the building down and to the left a little bit more, what we'll be able to do is enhance that interface. So that's the distance to the lot line and not to the neighbor's house. There's still quite a bit more distance between the building's main walls. At the back of the line, there's also a bioswale that's intended for stormwater. And then further off the screen, which you can't see on the site plan, is a naturalized area that's being retained. And as well, we have an amenity space closest to Kitchen Road where residents can sort of enjoy an outdoor area for a pergola or just to sit outside. And then there's a fire suppression tank proposed closer to Cairns Crescent. We actually have it underground. Staff have suggested it be an above-grade structure, and we're open to those changes. So all of those comments we've already received and are going back with that. Next slide, please. This is the sort of a concept of the landscaping that can occur. You know, we're taking the end caps on the parking aisles and actually putting trees in them, which is something you don't always see in parking lots. We're also enhancing the landscaping on the site amongst the existing trees that we're going to try to retain. So the goal is to keep as many trees as possible and only take down what's needed to facilitate the construction. Next slide, please. This is a sample of how the green roof would work on the flat roof version. We can still accommodate a green roof. If we use the mansard roof, it might be slightly smaller due to the second pitch we have to use when you do a mansard roof. Next slide, please. So this is the version Kelsey showed you. This is the flat roof iteration. What we've tried to do is provide articulation in the building that breaks the building up vertically and horizontally, so it's not just one big rectangle. It helps create a bit of a break in the massing. It's still a large building, and fundamentally, this is going to be a transformation for the neighborhood. We can't get around that fact. But the fact is we have urban land that's intended for this type of building, and we're trying to efficiently utilize that space and bring this type of housing. So we need to make the building as well designed as possible. Next slide, please. And so we've, through discussions with staff and council, the comment came up that we should try to make it a bit more Muskoka-fied. So earth tones and a bit of naturalized materials. And so we've got, stone veneer options, a bit of an earth tone color, and a mansard roof. So the mansard roof design, next slide, please, is seen here, but you can see it a little bit better in this rendering. The rendering actually shows how this could look at the back of the site from the parking lot. And it's that mansard roof that would add that additional 2 meters. So that's why you see that range in the height. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this is a community planning permit application. It's not an amendment to the community planning permit bylaw. It's a major class 3 community planning permit. And what that does is it allows for essentially what would have been an official plan, zoning bylaw, and site plan to be done all at once. And that's what we're proposing here. So the major increase is not for a land use change. I wanted to make that very clear. This is a permitted use. This is for added height and density in return for community benefits, and then some fluctuations to some of the other performance standards to facilitate this irregular lot shape to get that building density in here. Next slide, please. So we've submitted a lot of different supporting materials in this case. Everything from visual impact studies, planning justification reports, detailed architectural sets, all the civil engineering reports, FSRs, site grading, servicing plans, drainage plans, tree inventory and protection plans, and environmental impact study, geotechnical, lighting and photometric plan to ensure we're not having light scatter, light pollution on neighboring properties, traffic impact study, which will be peer reviewed, I believe at the developer's expense. In addition to that, we've also, as Kelsey mentioned, done enhanced community outreach. This is something that's not required, but our team has, individually met with some of the councillors, met with staff on a couple of occasions, done door-to-door knocking with neighbors and talked to whoever was available, have done mail-out posts, and have hosted a public open house. All of the comments that we've received are taken very seriously. They're not just sloughed off. We have a comment matrix they're all getting compiled into, even the negative ones. We're taking that all back with our clients. And then when we have all of these comments after today, what we'll do is we'll go back with the team, see where we can make adjustments to the plan, and then make a resubmission to show how we've addressed all of these comments. Next slide, please. So following today, essentially, we will have all of the comments I think we need in order to make an informed decision, and we will continue to ask, staff and council if there's any new comments received to forward to myself. We're open to receiving it, all the way to the end, and then we'll work on that resubmission. Next slide, please. Generally, that's the end of my presentation, and I want to open it up to comments and questions. But I think, in my opinion, this is a site that's well positioned and sized to accommodate this type of development. It's located near a major transportation route. It's located close access to the available transit and the main street to get to downtown. It's also a type of development that is consistent with the PPS. And, you know, our original planning report spoke to the old PPS. It's just as consistent with the new provincial planning statement that came into force on October 20th. And it conforms with the district official plan and the town of Huntsville official plan. And it's one of the allowed applications through the community planning permit bylaw with some variations. So in my opinion, this represents good planning for the town from a housing perspective. It'll bring a range and mix of new housing units. Most importantly, purpose-built rental and affordable housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all that. All right. Council, any comments or questions? I'm going to go to Councillor Cloutier first.
I'd like to thank you for your presentation. It was well put together. So the only height variation is just the roof is making it non-conformant, like with the extra one, right?
They're looking for a fourth floor.
Yes, that's right. So also that, I like the affordability housing aspect of it. It's greatly needed here. I know a lot of people don't think we need stuff like this, but right now at this time, this type of housing we do need. I like the area where it's going. I know the neighbors be upset about it. But also the only thing I'd like to see in it, for the amount of people that are going to live there, I just feel you don't have enough green space for in your area for people to do outside activities. Rather, it seems you only have the one area for the people to sit out there. I mean, there's probably going to be lots of kids living there. I'd like to see a little bit more, something that we know is going to be built for them.
Kelsey, can you speak to the other grassed area near the stormwater management?
Yes, so on the west side, there's an area that's grassed that was going to be an amenity area. They're talking about reconfiguring the detention pond that's there in the effort to shift the building. So that might change how that's configured currently, but I think that comment's been heard by the applicant that activity space is important. There's also the space to the south that could potentially be used for trails and stuff, which has also been mentioned, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair Stone, and thanks to the planner for the presentation. We all know there's such a need for any type of rental property in Huntsville. The average price of a home in Huntsville right now is about $700,000, so affordability here is not good. Many hardworking people with good jobs and our local kids have been priced out of the market. Most of those people will be priced out of the market permanently, and that's the reality. There isn't a shortage of homes for sale. The problem is that most people can't afford them. That's why a development like this needs careful consideration, just as the concerns of the neighborhood warrant the same amount of consideration. I'd like to see the developer build on this property, but I do have some concerns. And one of my concerns is specifically around the height of the building and the density of the development. I think it's reasonable to say that most people would acknowledge the need for this type of development. But the question here is, how big is too big? Does the density and the setbacks reasonably fit on this property and coexist with the area? I have some doubts. Those are questions around this development. I also question the exit out onto Kitchen Road. It's a steep gravel road. If we're going to have 200 cars using it, I question that. I'm not sure why that exit is part of the proposal. That would be a question I'd like answered. But rental apartments do make sense here, but I'd be more comfortable approving less density, 3 stories, which would allow for more green space on the property. Also, it would fit better into the existing neighborhood.
Thanks for that. Kelsey, sorry. Can you speak to the entrance onto Kitchen Road South?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. I think in the initial infancy of this proposal, there was just one entrance proposed. And I think it was suggested, and maybe through some conversations with, I don't know who, but that there be a second entrance. And I know that our internal staff, in terms of emergency service staff and building, generally prefer two entrances just for all compliance with building code and such. But we have raised that Kitchen Road South, the condition of it in that area, and that it should be included within the traffic impact study. So it's kind of two-pronged. It's beneficial to have a second entrance for all the things I discussed, but also the condition of the road is a consideration in having that entrance. So something that we've asked them to look further at.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fitzgerald, did you wish?
I would like to see, when this comes back, some 3D views of heights. Seen it in previous applications from different areas, you know, when you're driving up Highway 11. What does it look like? That would be a request of mine. And also it was mentioned above ground water storage, which to me aesthetically doesn't make much sense. Can someone elaborate on that?
Kelsey?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair. There is a visual impact study that they did, which is available online. We had asked for some revisions and updates to the renderings, just given how they were, but were provided, but they are on the website if anybody wants to take a look at those. And in terms of the stormwater roof, or the green roof that has stormwater retention, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not familiar, but I think based on it being a green roof and having plants and such, that allows for infiltration through that surface, which helps with their overall calculations going to pre-development conditions. So that's how they're using that as a part of their stormwater management plan.
Thanks.
I just wanted to follow up with, I agree to some of the other comments that have been made around the table regarding density and height.
Okay. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Chair Stone, and through you. I'm on the record as a councillor that is pro-development, and I'm also on the record of a councillor that wants lots and lots of rentals. So, I mean, I'm definitely in favor of this, and I'd like to thank the developer. Sorry, I'm in favor of something happening on this land. The developer is very reasonable. His planning team is very reasonable. They're easy to deal with. They've reached out to the public. So I think they're doing all the right stuff. I just, and I want to work with them. I want lots of units on this property. However, I have a concern about the number. And I'm looking at, like, even the visual impact study, I haven't seen the visual impact from the neighbors of concern. And maybe I missed it, but when I looked, I didn't see how it would look from their backyards and from the street looking back, or the people over on the odd numbers of cairns looking across. That visual impact hasn't been presented to me unless I've missed it. So I'd like to see that if there is such a thing. And the last couple of days, we did the budget, we did the DC study. It was all about balance, right? We're trying to balance the needs of the taxpayers with the needs of the corporation, trying to make sure we're doing this. And this is an exact same thing. We need rentals. There's people living out of their cars, people with jobs living in their cars, and we need to get them housed. But we do have to think about the people living right in that area. I know the pro forma matters. For us to get developers to want to build rental units, the pro forma has to work. It's not a charity, they are a business. And I know that a lot of developers, from my experience in real estate, they'll look at a piece of land and the value being around, you know, $25,000 to $30,000 per unit that they can build. So just knowing that background, I want to know, maybe even from Evan, if Evan can speak to it, is there a number that does not make sense to build anymore? Like in my math, 140, 145 units, the pro forma should still work. And if that's the case, could we step back the higher floor? Could we step it back so it's set back further? Can we then get less parking so it doesn't heat up the community as much with more asphalt? That's the kind of stuff that I'm looking at. And if we are going to grant any exemptions, I'm glad that the developer is looking at the community benefits of affordable housing and whatnot. I share the concern about the amenity area. I was thinking about that area below the stormwater management being a playground or something along those lines. But if it's getting shifted, then that's what it is. But anyway, I'm fully supportive of working with this developer. I think they've been very reasonable. I just want to find a compromise that keeps the neighbors happy too.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I would echo many of the comments that I've heard. A nice thing to go after everything else has been said. I absolutely am supportive of the work that the developer is doing on this site. And as was pointed out by Kelsey, it actually has been zoned for this kind of development. And as I understand it, I think 120 units is as of right. Is that correct, Kelsey? It's you could go forward with 120 units with the existing bylaw. Is that
Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's as of right, it's 60 units per gross hectare. So I think it's
the
1.2. Yeah,
120 units
yeah,
plus
around that. Yeah.
as of right, right?
Yeah.
So to Councillor Morrison's comments, I wonder what that number might be if it's not 180, but it's as of right 120. Maybe there's something in between. I don't know. But I'd be interested in that as well because uh, you know clearly it's a need, and I think that to Evan, you've really reached out and spent a lot of time trying to connect with everybody. But as part of that, there certainly are some issues that were raised. I would have said the thing about the amenity area as well. Whenever we have any type of new development that is significant of this kind of nature, we kind of wonder, all of these people are living there, what not only the amenity area around the building, but what's the connectivity piece for people who might um, go elsewhere to for recreation? Are there trails suggested that might connect to other surrounding trails? Any of that might be interesting because otherwise you're building kind of in isolation of the surrounding area. And I think you probably have given some thought to that, but I'd be interested in seeing more around that. I love the idea about the 25% of affordable housing. I think that's great. Um, my comment around that, though, is you've mentioned CMHC and the MAHIP program at the district. The MAHIP program is really competitive. There's only a certain big pot of money for that that's been allocated from over the next 5 years, and it is now very competitive. So I'm kind of curious how far discussions have gone with respect to reaching out to CMHC and the district as to well, actually, specifically CMHC, because they seem to have a bigger pot of money for this sort of thing. So is it just they're waiting for an approved plan, or have they given you signals that they're there to step up? Because I know of at least 2 other projects in Huntsville that are also applying for CMHC funding. So it's competitive, and I'd love to know where you guys sit in that particular discussion. And so there is a question around that. If you made reference to the applicant is really keen on providing affordable housing, but clearly if the funding doesn't come through, 25% is not a target they can achieve. So what is a target they could achieve, or does it completely remove affordable housing off the table?
Thank you for that. Were you looking for an answer to any of those
I
questions?
was. On that last question, just the discussions with CMHC and the district. And the applicant's desire, to deliver affordable housing in the absence of as much grant funding as possible.
Can I ask the applicant to come back on screen? There you are.
Hi there, through the chair. Thank you, Mayor Alcock. Those are all really great questions. I noted 7 that I'll try to answer, but I'll start with yours. So the truth is, we have reached out to CMHC and the district to start the conversation. CMHC was more strict, kind of like, come back to us when you've got approval. The district, however, is open discussion. They know this is on the table. They know this is a dedicated, mid-rise building for it. So I think that they have started to take this seriously. We haven't gotten any further than the initial conversations, but we have actually started those conversations rather than just telling it to you philosophically. The 25% is the sort of the direction we were going if we don't have to agree to affordable housing without the funding. So I think he is absolutely willing to provide some. Bottom line, that's a charitable amount. Just to be clear, right? This is with funding is how this works. Otherwise, it's a charitable donation, basically. So he is willing to accept some of that, and the amount is not yet known. It's going to be lower than 25%. That's just keeping things honest. In terms of the sort of number of as of right units we could get on site, we mentioned 120 based on the hectares. It's actually 130. So we're not, you know, we're just 50 units more than is permitted as of right, and that's that density requesting as an exchange for the sustainability features and the affordable housing. Connectivity in terms of trail network and sidewalks. I mean, this is a difficult scenario where, you know, in a not fully urbanized area of the town. So there are, you know, I'm going to say none or very limited sidewalk connections on the immediate abutting streets. There's connections once you get closer to the deli. And there's also parks within a five-minute walk. So there's going to be some degree of allowing a build out, and then future connectivity is going to happen. We have been discussing perhaps a cash in lieu contribution to help with sidewalks. That's also on the table. All of these asks add up, and quite honestly, coming back to the other question on from one of the other counselors about you know, what's the base dollar versus unit value and that delta. So I would say, in fairness to this developer, they haven't played the game of heights. Okay, we could have come in with 5, and we were pretty earnest with him that we need to pick the right height here. And so, in order to make that pro forma work, that 4-story and the number of units was sort of around that sweet spot. So I think it's good that he didn't play that game. Some developers will start high and then come down, and superficially in some cases. In this case, this is where he needs to be. So perhaps there's room to fiddle with the density. The thing that I would add is that if we come down a story, we lose quite a number of units without actually changing how this fundamentally. We would have to change the overall design of the building, and that's going back to the drawing board from an architecture standpoint. So I think the toss up there is, you know, where are we at with are units more important than the height? And I think that's the question we need to answer. There was a question about the above grade stormwater. What I was referencing was there's a fire suppression container, basically, that was proposed underground, but I believe it was district staff that have requested it be above ground because it's a bit easier. Personally, I think it looks nicer underground, but it is cheaper, and we can landscape it. So that was a conversation with staff that we can work out as well. And then the Kitchen Road connection. That connection was twofold. One, because Kitchen Road is planned as an urban collector. It's actually, in the fullness of time, planned to be a more robust road than Cairns Crescent. And that's why we were proposing a connection, is to help alleviate, when that road is built out, traffic into the local streets. For the meantime, Cairns is the only one that's paved right now. And the connection is to provide ingress and egress efficiently. So it's usually standard to have 2 points of access on a site. It's not an absolute requirement if we're, you know, landlocked, but this is an opportunity here for that. So that's why that connection is there. And then the last one was about, can we provide more of a 3D rendering showing the visual impact from neighbors? So I think that's something we can do. Provide more of the 3D renderings from along Cairns Crescent and along Kitchen Road. The difficulty is, and we'll try to reach out, is getting the photos that we need from the neighboring properties to show that 3D rendering from their perspective. If they're willing to let us on their property to take those photos to get to our rendering team, then we can do that. We'll try to reach out. Otherwise, we're kind of restricted from what we see on our property and along the public road allowance. And that was, I think, answers to all 7 of the questions I noted.
Thank you for all that. That's excellent. Any other Manager Richard Clark.
Just one point of clarification to a point Evan just made. The requirement for 2 entrances, it is an actual requirement given the number of units that are being proposed, and that's a district official plan policy. So that is a requirement, just to point that out.
Thanks for that. Councillor Morrison?
One last question of Evan, and thank you, Evan. You have all the answers. Like you know what's going on with this development, which is great. But talking about outdoor amenities, is there any plan for indoor amenities? Is there any like a rental room space for birthday parties, that kind of stuff, or
Evan?
gathering?
Through the chair, thank you. That's a great question. Yes, there is. So we have 386.5 square meters of amenity space. So if I were to do the math on that, 386 divided by 184, that's over 2 square meters of amenity space per unit. That's sort of the ideal amenity space ratio as a best practice in a lot of higher density cities. So this is actually quite a good number for the town.
All right. Any other comments from council? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Jared. So we've established an answer for the question to do with the exit onto Kitchen Road South. I appreciate that, Richard. So that brings up another point then. If we're going to have to consider that as an exit, we really need to put some serious thought into possibly putting pavement on that exit area to bring it up to a better standard than what's currently there right now, or we're going to have a lot of issues with dust, etc.
Thank you. All right, there's no resolution. Oh, Mayor Alcock.
All right, Chair Stone, just a last comment. It was on Kitchen Road, actually. Did we not identify in our capital plan that Kitchen Road South is being, the design work is happening in 2025? So the timing around this is actually pretty good for addressing a number of these issues.
Yes, that's right.
Including the development of sidewalks. So I think, again, that issue could be pursued a little bit further, and that would address some of that connectivity piece. And I appreciate your response, Evan. Thank you.
Councillor Morrison?
A question for you, Chair Stone. At this point, of course, it's a bit early stages. The developer and staff are still going to do a lot of work. At this table, should we be giving any direction as to what we deem to be an acceptable number, whether we're even amenable to the height exemption? The reason I ask is if there's stuff we're not going to be okay with, I wouldn't want the developer and staff to spend a whole pile of time on something that isn't going to work. So I don't know what is expected of us here today, or we're just here to listen.
Can I suggest that staff and the applicant have been making notes and they will be working on that? All right, so before we move on, I have some comments of my own. There is no housing crisis. There is a rental housing crisis, and it's desperate. The hospital continues to hire people, and then those people cannot find a place to live, and they go elsewhere. Fairburn needs a new 200 positions filled for the spring of 2026. Staff are currently assessing increasing heights in certain locations around Huntsville. I believe this area will absolutely be on the list for increasing up to 5 stories. But as far as the proposal goes, a building of this size is incongruent next to single-family dwellings, for sure. However, this is a growth area with many commercial and light industrial businesses and also some high-density dwellings. As was noted, the applicant already has the right to go up 3 stories. And yes, if it were only 3 stories, that is still an imposing building. But if we allow another story, we can insist on some changes to the design while getting an additional 46 desperately needed rental units. For me, the need outweighs the benefit of reducing the height by 4 meters. The changes I'd like to see in the design is to move the building back and over to allow a larger buffer between the residential buildings directly abutting it, and allowing some of those enormous, beautiful, mature trees to remain. Perhaps spin the building around. So the pretty side of the building is facing the road, or make it an H design instead of a C design might help. But I would definitely like to see a step back of the third and potentially the fourth story, which would absolutely give the illusion of a much smaller building from Cairns Crescent. And more trees on the Cairns Crescent side, I think, is a must. I know there's some plantings already in the design, but they can't do enough. So those are my comments, and there's no decision being made today. So hopefully the applicant has heard what we've had to say and can make some changes. And with that, we're going to move on to the next application. All right, Richard's sitting in for Lisa, I believe. You can go ahead with the Connor application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry it's me and not Lisa, but I'll do my best. So the subject property in this instance is 30 Clovelly Road. The property is within the waterfront designation in the official plan and the waterfront residential 60-meter precinct in the community planning permit bylaw. And it abuts Lake of Bays, which is a cold water lake, and the property also fronts onto and is accessed via Clovelly, which is a private road. The purpose and effect of this application is to permit the change of use of an existing 20 square meter legal non-complying accessory structure from its current use, which I believe is a spa, to a private cabin. So that is, I think, building 1 on the plan in front of you. Other structures on the property, I believe there are 5 in total, well, 6 in total, including the dock. So there's a single detached dwelling, which is number 2. There's a sauna, which is number 5. There's a garage, which is number 3, I think. And a additional private cabin, bunkie. I got those backwards. The private cabin is, or bunkie is 3, and the garage is 4. So quite a number of structures, but they are all legal. They were all legally established, so they are legal non-complying buildings and structures. All except the sauna building, which is number 5. Oh, and there's an animation just to show you the building that's subject to this application. Thank you, Lisa. No. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the Community Planning Permit Bylaw. No objections have been received. Here are a few pictures of what the property looks like today. Just go back. Given the analysis of the town's policy and the proposal, the application appears to conform to the intent of the official plan, is consistent with the provincial planning statement, and meets the applicable criteria for approval under the Community Planning Permit Bylaw. As such, staff is recommending that the application be provisionally approved and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks very much. I'll call on the applicant or representative if they would like to make any comments. Is there anyone online, perhaps?
Yes, I will bring them in now.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, I can hear you.
Hi there. Good. Hopefully you can
There you are.
see us. We're Howard and Maribeth Konar. We live in Rochester, New York, so we're attending remotely. And we are happy to answer any questions, but we do want to make clear that these are existing non-conforming uses. We acquired this property in May. And we have not done anything to the property. We're just here because we would like to replace the septic system. And we found out that there's non-compliance, and that's why we submitted the application.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to go to council. Any comments or questions from council? I see none. Moved by Mayor Alcock, seconded by Deputy Mayor Armour. Be it resolved that Planning Council provisionally approve Community Planning Permit Application CPP 134 2024 HTE. The purpose and effect of which is to change the use of an existing legal non-complying accessory structure to a private cabin and to provide relief from subsection 4.3.3E of the Community Planning Permit Bylaw 2022-97 as amended, to increase the maximum number of private cabins permitted on the lot from 1 to 2. And the conditions are in your package and on the screen, so I won't read all of that. Does anyone have any comments or questions? All right, then. All in favor? And that carries. All right. Thanks, Richard. All right. Last item. Kirsten's up.
Thank you, Chair Stone. Richard is here to help me with questions because I have not been doing much policy stuff in the last couple of years. Yeah, you can't hear me? It's better? No? So, council asked staff to look at what we could do with rural policy lot creation in the official plan. And so I've attached, there's actually a lot of information in the report about what the other area municipalities are doing, what the district official plan says in regards to rural lot creation, and some information about the new PPS. So ultimately, we are suggesting that we could do a bit of a hybrid approach with providing alternative development standards to properties where they can't meet our existing standards, but in exchange, they would have to look at increasing setbacks, maintaining vegetation, and demonstrating that there is a need for them not to be able to create lots that meet our lot standards. So I'm happy to answer any questions about anything if there's any suggestions on things that you'd like to see changed. And if council approves the proposal, then we would go forward with an official plan amendment and start the public consultation process.
Are there any are there any comments or questions of council? No? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. I'm glad to see this policy come forward because this council's been pretty consistently dealing with this issue. So does the policy address anything to do with properties that aren't on year-round roads, but that are on year-round private roads? Just wondering.
No, we haven't included anything along those lines because that is a much it's a significant discussion, and with all of the challenges we've seen with private roads arising in Lincoln Bays as well, we weren't going to address anything in that manner with this set of policies. And I did forget, we had our GIS people do a map for us that shows just a rough scan. It hasn't been truthed, but it's based on the impact data. The number of vacant lots existing in the rural area is over 1,000 currently. So there's 1,000 vacant lots right now that could be developed. I'm not sure how many of them could be split because we didn't get that far through the analysis, but at the same time, there's a significant number of vacant lots. So
Councillor
on
Cluche.
year-round maintained roads. Sorry.
Through you, Chair. Does this open things up to somebody trying to put a rural subdivision in, say on 100 acres to 100 lots, or this just?
This is specifically just lot creation on year-round maintained roads. So
Okay.
it wouldn't affect the rural subdivision estate policies that we have
Good.
in the official plan.
Thank
We did look at the potential for changing those as well. And until the district updates their official plan, I don't think we want to go any further down that path, because we might be doing something that then would no longer conform to their OB by the time they have their review done. I'm anticipating the review will be done over the next year, and then we would know in early 2026 what we could do with our OP.
Thank you.
Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Chair Stone, and through you too, Kirsten. Would it be possible to send us a link to that GIS location of where those
Yeah.
properties are?
It is part of the presentation. We can show it as well.
It was part of the presentation?
No, I just received it this morning, so. But we will attach it to the minutes then as well, I think, so. Yeah. It's fading in and out. Yeah, so all the properties that are highlighted in green are the vacant lots at this point. Like I said, it hasn't been truthed to ensure that it's 100% accurate, but there's a significant number.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Chair Stone. We've had this discussion many times and looked at this kind of mapping. Lots that are created are of no use to us unless they're for sale on an open and fair market. So I think it's prudent for us to create as many as we can to try and solve the current crisis, and we're headed in the right direction.
Mayor Alcock. It's better when you're here and you can pound the table.
Thank you very much, Chair Stone. I know it really pains you to have to look over to the camera. I know. Hey, so thanks for the presentation, Kirsten. And I'm really glad that we're moving forward with this process. And it was sort of interesting reading about other municipalities. I thought Gravenhurst was, pretty straightforward. And I hope we move to that direction where their minimums are smaller and their acreages are also smaller. But I'm kind of curious, are we only focusing on this, or can we consider things like shared driveways as we consider this policy? Because that seems to me we will be able to maintain our rural character, as well as if there is an application that has a shared driveway, opens up maybe 2 or 3 lots on a large piece of property, that that kind of policy should be considered as well. Are we looking at that?
Through you, Chair Stone, it's something we could consider. We didn't incorporate anything specifically about a shared driveway, but we did include reference to the road approval authority having to be okay with whatever's being proposed. So if we can incorporate something along those lines when we do our public notification, though.
I think that would be, from my perspective, really helpful. I just think if it's on a municipal road and the lot itself is large enough, and again, if you can maintain rural character, and it's consistent within the area, the immediate area, then I think we should be able to consider that. And I also concur with Councillor Fitzgerald's comment about all of those lots. It's great, except that they're not for sale. And they've been there for a long time. So, but we do know people who do want to sever and go forward. So anyway, I'm really happy that we're starting this process. Thanks.
Richard?
Yes, just One follow-up to that question through you, Mr. Chair. So we will be, through the official plan amendment, the next step, we will be talking to the district. And obviously some of these roads are district roads. And they have their own frontage requirements for different classes of district road. But I do know that in the district official plan, there are policies that say if you're going to, if you can't meet those, then one of the things that they may entertain is if it's a shared access. So maybe what the mayor is pointing out would be something we could talk further with the district about.
Councillor Fitzgerald?
Thanks, Chair Stone. Do we have a timeline of when the district is going to be finished the review and come out with their new? So, to me, this seems like a game of hurry up and wait, and then get theirs, and then work on ours. Is it 5 years? Because if it is, we need to amend our policy so things can happen here in Huntsville while not waiting for the district.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. We have to go through a conformity and consistency exercise with now that there's new provincial planning statement, our official plan has to be consistent with the provisions in that, but it also has to conform to the district official plan. So we can't bring forward anything that doesn't conform to the district official plan because it would not be approved by the district at that point. And all of our official plan amendments have to be approved by the district. So we can work with them. And I can't remember, I think we budgeted for an OP review in 2026. I believe that it's one of the projects that we will work on. And through Richard's report of the priorities of planning policy review, it is on the list to happen. We were doing the secondary plan first. It's a major project as well. But we can look at that. And I anticipate district will be moving forward. Our official plan was done so that we only have to update it every 10 years, not every 5 years. So we're not due for an update necessarily, but we do recognize there are changes that need to happen. And so this is a first step towards that, but we will look at other things as they come up as well. I know the district is hoping to have theirs done in the next year.
So. I guess.
For me, I would like to look at waterfront backlots. I know that we've had a couple applications that it seems very odd that they have to jump through some hoops. They're 500 meters back on the other side of a road. And, you know, it seems kind of ridiculous sometimes. So hopefully we can get some better, allow other development to happen on waterfront backlots that aren't really near the water.
I did.
All right, I'm going to go to Deputy Mayor first.
Thanks, Chair Stone. Just a quick comment. I'm dealing with a resident right now who lives on Burnell Road, who has 65 acres of property, over 400 feet of frontage on Burnell Road, with 2 access points. One is considered a driveway, the other is considered a farm access road that they won't let him use to build a second house on his property to house his family. So that's the type of thing we're dealing with. The road, that farm access is probably in better condition than most driveways along Brown Road right now, Burnell Road. So it's the type of thing we're dealing with.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
I guess for me, I see a sense of urgency with this, and it seems like maybe another opportunity to make some of these law creations happen is to go to a class 2 or class 3, but maybe looking at reducing or waiving fees, whether it be development or rezoning or whatever, because it's not happening fast enough. And I know from what I see coming down the pipe with our OP and everything, these are things we want to do, and we are doing it all the time at this committee. Maybe we need to incentivize it a little bit more to solve the problem before we address it with DOP.
All right, I've got 4 hands that went up. Mayor Alcock.
Thanks, Chair Stone. I'm just following up on the comment around the OP process, and I agree with Councillor Fitzgerald. I think that I think this is urgent. We've known that this is what we want to do. We have examples where they're less restrictive elsewhere. And I recognize that the district is undergoing its own mini OP review in certain policy areas, this being one of them. But I don't think that should prohibit us from marching forward, and we can work with them in tandem as we do this, because this is clearly what we want to do. And if in their review that they want to be more restrictive, then we'll fight it. I think every municipality would fight it. So I think we should go forward on this, and I think that's what you're proposing, Kirsten, but I more than that, let's go forward and not be prohibited by what the district is doing. They're going to go forward and they're looking at a number of policy areas, one of them being resort. So this is just one. And I don't want us to be bogged down by what they're doing.
Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair Stone. This is a good start, a good change to the policy, but I think that the planning department really needs to go back and continue to look at all the past decisions, even in the recent term of council, that this council continues to approve as far as applications that come here that may or may not be supported by policy by our planning department, so that we are not having to continually go against what is being proposed by our planning department. And Councillor Stone, your waterfront backlot is one of those things that we see here a lot. I'd like to see our planning department specifically zone in on those issues that we know are happening on a regular basis that are coming to this council. So I'm assuming that this policy will help streamline, this specific area that's been addressed. And I'm assuming it'll allow staff to approve a lot more of this kind of stuff on their own. That's the intent here.
Yep. Excellent. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Councillor Song. I've asked Director Maxwell a question. Back when we allowed 200 feet frontages, what was the minimum lot size in the rural community at the time?
I think it was 1 acre, and that changed with the implementation of the official plan in 2006.
Okay.
So we've been almost 20 years with different lot standards.
Of 400 feet and how many acres?
5.
And 5.
5. Yeah.
Okay.
2.5, 5, and 10.
2.5, 5, and 10. Okay. So you could have 400 feet and 2.5 acres.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I guess a couple things. With Councillor Clark, I think this is great. We're going in the right direction, but it needs to be a bit more aggressive. Bring in for a bunch of reasons. For one, we're going to approve it anyway if people want to fight it. And that's a lot of planning staff's time just putting the reports together. It's a lot of pressure on the planning staff dealing with all these applications that have to come to planning council and shouldn't. So I would love to see, I don't think 1 acre is appropriate, but I would love to see going back to the old ways of 200 feet and 2.5 acres. Corey and I sold a lot of real estate that way, and it's still rural. We saw the discussion yesterday about the plow trucks and where the plow trucks are going. And if we create a new road, if somebody wants to punch in a road, then that's an extra area that the plow truck has to go to in a new road. Then they might have to come back and fill it with more sand and then go back out again. If we're putting homes on existing roads, there's no pressure on our services. There's no pressure on our staff. There's an assessment growth. There's more of a community, more people living in the same area that kids can play together and they can get out and play bridge, do whatever it is you do in your community. It's huge. The benefits of allowing more rural development, I understand reading the report and I know where the province is coming from, but the province is a province-wide planning statement. It's a province-wide planning statement with a lot of input. They did consider this year, as you noted in your report, Director Maxwell, they did consider some changes to the rural policies. They chose not to, but that just shows you how tough it is when you're trying to implement a province-wide planning statement. So what we need to look at is the benefits in our community are huge. One, affordable housing, and I want to rephrase that to be the ability of people to be able to afford housing. So when you allow more rural severances, somebody with 65 acres, like Deputy Mayor Emmer's talking about, that person might need X amount of dollars just to keep his bills paid because interest rates are at 6%. And maybe this happened, inflation, bread, eggs, everything else is more money. So they can sell, make a bit of money. So, number 2 is they can sever this land, get it into the hands of family members so that the family members can stay in our community and work because otherwise they can't afford to. And number 3 is they create lots that go to the open market. And when you create more lots, the lot prices come down and we get more people paying taxes in our town. So I think my thoughts are we need to be more aggressive and get to 200 feet, 2.5 acres as a right, and just put that in the policy, be done with it. That's my thoughts.
Councillor Cloutier.
Through you, Chair. We definitely need this, as we all know and we've all said, but I don't want to see a whole bunch of lots come in, get severed, and then we sit back, we've got 1,000 lots sitting there not being used. I would like to see if somebody's coming with a severance to us, like for family members or to sell, a time restraint, either you do something with it instead of sitting on it for years and years and years, because I think that's what's happened with all the empty stuff that we have, you know, and I don't know if we can do that or not, but I'm sure you can't because people own the land. But one way of getting them to start building or thing is make it affordable for them to build with or on our charges when they go to do rural development, so.
Excellent. Any other comments? All right, let's get out of here. Whoop. Moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Morrison. Be it resolved that council direct staff to initiate an official plan amendment to provide alternate development standards for rural residential lot creation. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that carries. Moved by Councillor Cloutier, seconded by Councillor Schumacher. Be it resolved that confirmation bylaw 2024-112 be received and passed this 13th day of November 2024. All in favor? And that carries. And finally, moved by Councillor Renwick, seconded by Councillor Clark. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 3:16 p.m. All in favor? And that carries.